let's do a compare and contrast between Ta-Nehisi Coates reminding us of our history. And I think this is really one of the most important things about the reparation conversation is when you get to the actual policy implementation details of this, there's a lot of legitimate operational questions that people ask and flaws that people like Adolph Reed have identified. And there's also some really interesting and smart answers to them, like Professor Doherty has put forward. But to me, and I talked with Marissa Baradaran about this, and I agreed with her that this is also just, if you look at it also as like something analogous to a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that happened in South Africa for a actual full accounting of this country's history that is regularly lied about and obscured on a daily basis, that even this hearing in the House, when you had Ta-Nehisi Coates and you had Danny Glover and other, people literally just being clear about what our history is, that is incredibly important. And it's incredibly important because because Mitch McConnell in 2019 can come out in public and still say this.
There's going to be a hearing on Juneteenth on reparations for slavery tomorrow. I'm wondering, where do you stand on that issue? Do you believe in reparations for slavery? And if not, should there be a public apology from Congress or from the president in recognition of the theft of labor?
Yeah, I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago, for whom none of us currently living are responsible, is a good idea. We've, tried to...
For which we're responsible or for which we're benefiting.
Right. That's the big distinction right there.
Years ago, for whom none of us currently living are responsible, is a good idea. We've, tried to deal with our original sin of slavery by fighting a civil war, by passing landmark civil rights legislation. We've elected an African-American president. I think we're always a work in...
Who I set out on day one to destroy.
Mm-hmm.
President. I think we're always a work in progress in this country, but no one currently alive was responsible for that. And I don't think we should be trying to figure out how to compensate for it. First of all, it'd be pretty hard to figure out who to compensate. We've had waves of immigrants as well who've come to the country and experienced dramatic discrimination of one kind or another. So no, I don't think reparations are a good idea.
Oh, thank you, Mr. McConnell.
Thank you. No one ever talks about our own slavery experiences. No, I mean, this though is I think it's actually really important in the answer to that. This is one of the reasons that you don't make it this kind of like general metaphysical idea about whiteness, because precisely because of what Matt said, which is that it's not about individual moral culpability in this, and whether you directly, and by the way, let's be real here. We should obviously also be including Jim Crow and redlining and generations of systemic economic and political terrorism. But if you frame it to, even if you have no culpability at all, you could have the best politics in the world, but part of your land wealth, as an example, is a direct outcome of the complete destruction of another group of people. That's a material reality. That's not some broad, amorphous kind of moral claim. That's, you're in a position because of a theft, and we're going to have a direct material response to that. The other part of it, though, that is moral and is historical, is getting clear on what precisely that history is, so that, as an example, you could acknowledge that plenty of immigrants have faced discrimination and have faced very bad things in this country, but you would never be able to come out in public and draw an analogy between even the worst off-the-boat discrimination and literally being a slave for hundreds of years in building this country on free labor. That is, and of course, side note, obviously, Mitch McConnell has been working very steadily to undermine and erode many parts of that quote-unquote landmark civil rights legislation. Some of us might call that just the official legal end of apartheid in this country in the 1960s. But I guess, and also ushering through justices on federal circuit courts who now in the latest iteration, in addition to opposing the key parts of Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act, are not even taking an opinion on Brown versus Board of Education. So we probably should include that as well. But here's Ta-Nehisi Coates giving us sort of broader lessons here at the testimony yesterday.
And so for a century after the Civil War, black people were subjected to a relentless campaign of terror, a campaign that extended well into the lifetime of Majority Leader McConnell.
Right.
It is tempting to divorce this modern campaign of terror, of plunder, from enslavement. But the logic of enslavement, of white supremacy, respects no such borders. And the god of bondage was lustful and begat many heirs: coup d'etats and convict leasing, vagrancy laws and debt peonage, redlining and racist GI bills, poll taxes and state-sponsored terrorism. We grant that Mr. McConnell was not alive for Appomattox, but he was alive for the electrocution of George Stinney. He was alive for the blinding of Isaac Woodward. He was alive to witness kleptocracy in his native Alabama and a regime premised on electoral theft. Majority Leader McConnell cited civil rights legislation yesterday, as well he should, because he was alive to witness the harassment, jailing, and betrayal of those responsible for that legislation by a government sworn to protect them. He was alive for the redlining of Chicago and the looting of black homeowners of some $4 billion. Victims of that plunder are very much alive today. I am sure they'd love a word with the Majority Leader.
If I may, Sam Harris does not see the ability to have a productive conversation with Ta-Nehisi Coates. I couldn't resist.
Yeah,
Sorry.
better get Coleman Hughes on. Sam Harris.
Get Coleman Hughes on. Obviously, you couldn't have and I have plenty of disagreements with Ta-Nehisi Coates, but I think it's pretty extraordinary that you could have a productive conversation with an undergraduate who wrote a sort of bargain bin copy of every right-wing trope about race relations in this country in Quillette. You could do a couple hours with him, but you certainly couldn't do it with a MacArthur Genius Grant winner who has a deep sense of American history. No, of course not. And let alone, of course, we're not even, of course, considering a Bill Fletcher Jr. or an Adolph Reed or a Cornel West, obviously.